Environmental Improvement Program Committee. And the date today is Wednesday, March 26th, and the time is 9:55. And the first item on our agenda is a roll call to determine a quorum. Maria.
Ms. Conrad Seda. Ms. Faustinos. Ms. Hayes.
Here.
Ms. Lane. Here. Mr. Rice. Mr. Settlemeyer. Here. Ms. Williamson. Here. Madam Chair, we have a quorum.
Great, thank you. Now we'll go over the remote and in-person meeting rules for the day, which we have all heard many times, but bear repeating. For members of the public who are joining us remotely to observe the meeting, go to trpa.gov. Under the calendar header, click on Governing Board Hybrid Meeting for March 26, 2025. There you will find a link to the public webinar hosted on Zoom. To address committee members directly with your comment, raise your hand in Zoom by clicking the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen at the appropriate agenda item. With your hand raised, you will be unmuted by TRPA staff and have 3 minutes to address the committee. If you have used the dial-in numbers to join by telephone, you can dial *9 to raise your hand and unmute. For items that are agendized as informational only, we will hear public comment during the general public comment period at the end of the meeting. For items agendized for action or possible action, we will hear public comment before the committee takes any action. For those committee members who are remote, if you wish to speak, please also raise your hand in Zoom. You will find the hand icon at the bottom of your screen. Remote committee members may not use the chat box to make any comments or to have sidebar conversations. Please, everyone, remember to mute your mic unless speaking to cut down on background noise. Finally, I would also like to ask that all remote committee members turn on their cameras if they are able. Members of the public who have joined us in person, please raise your hand at the appropriate time for public comment and you will be called to the front to speak. Committee members who are in person, please raise your hand if you wish to comment and speak clearly into the microphone in front of you. If you are viewing the webinar on a personal computer, please ensure that your microphone and speakers are turned off to prevent audio feedback into the room. The next item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. And staff, do we have any changes? No, okay. So we will deem the agenda approved as posted for approval of the minutes. We have agenda item number 2. And we have a draft set of minutes from the September 25th, 2024 meeting on page 47 of your packet. Does any member of the committee wish to make a change? I would just make one minor change. My last name has an S at the end. No worries, no worries. If we can have, I think we can do this as just an I vote, right? So all those in favor of the minutes as submitted and corrected? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, hearing none, minutes are approved. Okay, so now we're going to go on to our federal and state legislative updates. Item number 3 on the agenda. Information on this item can be found on page 415. As a reminder to the public, since this item is informational only, we'll hear any public comment on this topic at the final public interest comment period. So now I'll turn this over to Julie. And welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Julie Reagan, TRPA's Executive Director. I just have a few slides to give you an update, and certainly my colleagues here, Kim Carringer, Shannon, and Kat can chime in if I've missed anything, and I am fighting a head cold, so if my voice sounds funny, that is why, but no one's around me, and I will put my mask on when my other colleagues join me at the dais here. The first slide is around some federal updates, and at our board meeting last month in the executive director report, we had a good discussion and some questions around what are some of the implications of federal funding issues related to TRPA and our partners EIP Environmental Improvement Program projects. So we wanted to fill you in on some updates that we were happy to receive back in Washington. So we did have a delegation of about 10 members of Team Tahoe, some new participants this year that had not been in the rotation of the Washington, D.C. visits. And the picture on the right is a snapshot there of some of the representatives, but it was terrific to have both the board chair and the acting director of the Tahoe Transportation District, Jim Marino and Andy Chapman, that attended. Transportation is always front and center, so having their participation was excellent. We had Chairman Smokey from the Washoe Tribe of Nevada and California again join us, and then Tony Koralski from the North Tahoe Community Alliance was his first opportunity. And the North Shore obviously is has a lot of important issues that are tied to federal policy. So it was wonderful to have his participation. The League to Save Lake Tahoe and the business community. Shadar Edelman was his first trip. Heavenly and the Vail Resorts companies have been very engaged in our Team Tahoe work as a private contributor to the environmental improvement program for the last 25 years, 30 years. And Shadar is new in town, but a returnee, started his career in Tahoe, and to have him back and have his perspective of now working around the country in the ski industry, it was great to have him plugged in because they had a lot of questions just about particularly related to the Forest Service's permitting and implications to the workforce, because ski resorts here in Tahoe and across the West are permitted on public lands, on Forest Service land. So it was excellent to have his perspective. And then just a quick note of the photograph in the lower left is Congressman Kevin Kiley, who was in town in Tahoe last week and met with a series of stakeholders and citizens while he was doing a cycle in the district. And we continued some of those conversations with him that we started in Washington. And we were joined there by representatives from the Lake Tahoe Community College. And we're in the boardroom of the South Tahoe Public Utility District. And so that was a great opportunity. But key to our discussions really was when we were in Washington, it was the day the House voted on the continuing resolution, which then the Senate voted it on for the Friday after we left, which kept the government open. And there was a threat of a shutdown. It was a very tumultuous time. And how Tahoe would be affected was a big conversation. And the main thing I wanted to flag for you on that one is the continuing support for through the Restoration Act is in the budget, which now, goes through the end of this fiscal year. The federal fiscal year expires September 30th. There was a concern because text that links certain pots of money in the federal budget to Tahoe, that explanatory text is no longer in the continuing resolution. So our message was, make sure those funds, don't go to another part of the country under the purview of the national, priorities of the Forest Service, but those dollars that were particularly specified for Tahoe in previous budgets, we want those to be here because it would affect forest health, watershed restoration, aquatic invasive species, among other programs. So that was a big message, and our delegation is firmly behind us and are sending letters to the administration to make sure that Tahoe gets the dollars that we're expecting, because we could have impacts in some of those programs. So that was on the docket. Also, next year's budget, it's time to start. Again, we haven't even sorted this year's budget, and here we go for 26, which kicks in officially on October 1st. There's no likelihood there will be a done deal on the budget for next year, but at least we were pressing the issues forward there. And we had some congressionally designated funding, AKA earmarks, in the fiscal 25. Those went away. So we actually have some real impacts on Highway 28 on the corridor that Tahoe Transportation District was relying on. But we were encouraged to resubmit those ones that were cut out so that we might have a shot in next year's fiscal 26. So we are going to go forward with that. And then we'll continue on with just federal staffing. We're all very concerned across the country of just impacts to staffing at the Forest Service level. Our local Lake Tahoe Basin Management Unit had about 11 staff members that were terminated. That's about 10% of their workforce. They have been brought back on, but they're on administrative leave. So there still is a lot of uncertainty about how work will get done. And then it's a bit of a 1-2 punch. You've got the federal, workforce issues that are going on at the same time of uncertainty on the budget. So this time of the year is when the Forest Service is doing contracts for fuels reduction projects, pump outs at bathrooms in the federal beaches, in the federal lands, Forest Service lands where there are beaches, and all the staff that they need. They've not been able to let those contracts because of the uncertainty of how much is the dollar figure that they'll have to work with. But we've been in very close connection with Eric Walker, the forest supervisor here in Tahoe. He was having meetings with the Washington office this week to sort out like what is the bottom line number of the budget that's coming. And so we're very closely, supporting their work and raising the profile of Tahoe in the budget process. So just wanted to let you know there's a lot going on there, but we're in lockstep with our partners because it's not just TRPA's issues. It's really the whole basin partnership and effects to the destination stewardship program that we're all working very hard on for visitor management for the summer. Okay, I'll take the next slide, please. Just a couple more things on state legislative affairs. And we briefed you last month and the executive director on our 2 budgets. Couple things in Nevada since that conversation. We've had a lot of hearings in Carson City, and I really appreciate all the board members that have been showing up to support us and to be there to testify, sit in the audience as moral support. We've had 6 initial bill hearings. 1 was moved out on forest health already. That was a clarification cleanup that the Department of Natural Resources, Conservation Natural Resources was leading in Nevada. And we've got 2 policy bills that came out of our interim oversight committee. One is a potential business improvement enabling legislation, similar to the business improvement districts on the North Shore that have been very active and actively supporting transit and housing initiatives. SB 420 just came out in text, and that would be an enabling legislation for the Nevada side to have the same opportunity for businesses to go together and to form a business improvement district. That hasn't had a hearing yet, but I know Member Hill and other members of the board have been very active in discussing that with the delegation in Nevada. So we'll keep you apprised. And then Senator Skip Daly in the interim oversight committee also put a bill draft forward to open up Article 9 of the compact. And that is the section of the compact that set up the Tahoe Transportation District. And it's the only provision, it's the only section in the compact that actually can be amended without Congress consenting. So if a change were to be made in that section, it would only be necessary to go through the state of California and Nevada to have identical changes. And that was his authorship of that was really designed to promote more transportation funding from both states. But I think there's a lot of conversations happening around that bill. And actually, I'm going down to meet with the senator tomorrow to get his latest thinking on that and what committees it might go through. And we'll keep you apprised. And then another a big important priority for us is implementing the shoreline plan, having the 2 states clean up laws around the no wake zone. So we have a 600-foot no wake zone, which is kind of a low speed ordinance that came out of our shoreline plan in the basin, but state law has never conformed and matched that. So we're running bills in both states to do that. So that's another priority for us. And then in Nevada, we've gotten word that we will be closing the budget. And so we'll be down in Carson City next week to do that, which is a good sign. They had a lot of questions from our first hearing. We answered their questions, and we're hoping that that goes forward without a hitch, as we discussed in operations. And then on the next slide, just a couple more California updates, and I'll turn it back to the chair. We've been in Sacramento at the same time as well. Devin and I yesterday were there with member Alex Loomer, who was supporting the California Tahoe Alliance, which is basically a subset of the California partnership of around the EIP. There's about a dozen members of the alliance, local governments, the League to Save Lake Tahoe, the Tahoe Fund, the Lake Tahoe Community College, and we were spreading the message about the climate bond and priorities for Tahoe that could benefit deferred maintenance in state parks. Think Emerald Bay as one example, and all the good work that member Lane and many of you around the table have been pushing on for Emerald Bay. Same thing on 28 to get a handle on these corridors. We might have opportunities in the proposition that passed around climate in California to use some dollars to support, the Emerald Bay project and Kings Beach, the pier that we need to get rebuilt that this board approved many years ago. So we're excited about that. And then as we speak, actually, Devin Middlebrook is testifying at an Assembly Sub 4 committee on a provision that's being run as a budget trailer bill on transportation. And this ties back to the 777 strategy of each sector, federal, state, local, private, coming up with additional dollars to support transportation. If we could change the federal formula, or if we could match the federal formula population in California that we got done in federal law 10 years ago, it could potentially open up 3+ million a year for transit and transportation. And so we have the first hearing. We've been working on this for years, and many of you around the table have helped us, but we have an information briefing this morning. So that's progress. May not, may not get over the finish line this session, but at least we have our first hearing. It would reapportion transportation and transit funding in the state. And to lessen impact of other regions, we would propose to do that over 4 years. So that was what we thought was a good strategy. As transportation funding kind of increases, if we phase this in over 4 years, it should be a very negligible impact on other regions. So that's the strategy there. And then there's 2 other bills that we were talking about with the members yesterday. A water infrastructure for fire bill, which is super important to our fire, our local water purveyor colleagues with the LA fires and the water supply issue. It's like very timely because people are now finally aware that you need actual, additional upgrades in times of catastrophic fire, not to necessarily fight the fire, but to handle the spot fires that happen in the urban neighborhoods. And we've got communities all around the lake, particularly on the West Shore, that have no fire hydrants because of just the way, the communities were developed over time. So we were supporting this AB 372 bill. And then there's also SB 427, which member Loomer is very passionate about, and eliminating appropriation sunsets on the Habitat Conservation Fund, which really helps agencies like our partner agency, the California Tahoe Conservancy. So those are just a couple examples. And then the last slide is really just pivoting to the summit. We were mentioning to our colleagues in Sacramento, to staff, and to members that we met with yesterday about the summit, and Senator Adam Schiff is hosting, and we expect to have a nice tribute to Senator Feinstein. It would be his first time hosting as our new senator in California. This is a picture of one of our ledge and member staff tours, and I appreciate some board members that participated in that. That was right down the street here at the Raid Meadow, near the Kale Complete Streets project that we just talked about in the operations committee. But we had a really fantastic turnout last year with a lot of folks that were in town from DC, from the 2 states, the day before the summit, to get people out into the environment to see firsthand some of the good project work that's happening. So we were out talking about that too. And we're hoping for the first week in August, which is a little sooner than the summit traditionally had been, but hopefully those of you maybe that perhaps that couldn't attend in the past because of the date might have more opportunities to participate this year. And with that, I'll turn it back to the chair. Thank you.
Ashley Conrad Sada for the record. Thanks so much for those updates. And if there's any way or anything that you need from the EIP in terms of letters of support or advocacy with particular members, I think, I'll at least speak for myself. I think I'd be happy to do that. And really, especially once we have numbers so that we can advocate for the things that we need, that would be helpful.
Sure.
And I forgot my other comment. That was it. Thank you. That was so helpful.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Any other comments? Yeah. Well, I'll just add to, I think, a phenomenal amount of work that's being done by staff, really appreciated. And of course, all these things deeply affect the work of this committee. So, we have to have the resources to be able to implement the projects that are critical to our success. So just want to applaud staff for, keeping track of all this at all the various.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Okay, so if there are no further comments, we will move on to agenda item number 4, which is the Lake Tahoe Restoration Act funding priorities and upcoming environmental improvement program projects. Information on this item can be found on page 417. As a reminder to the public, since this item is informational only, we'll hear any public comment on this topic at the final public interest comment period. And now I'll turn it over to Kat McIntyre. Thank you, Kat.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. Good morning. My name is Kat McIntyre. I'm the Environmental Improvement Program Department Manager here at the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency, and I am joined by my colleague Shannon Friedman, who's the Environmental Improvement Program Manager here at the TRPA. Next slide, please. For this presentation, I'm going to go over a brief background on the Lake Tahoe Restoration Act. Then I will review the fiscal year 26 priority list and funding requests that we submitted to DC in the last 2 weeks. Then I'll hand it over to Shannon to talk about the EIP priority projects that will be coming forward in 2025 that we'll see actually active on the ground, and then we'll open it up for discussion. Next slide, please. So the Environmental Improvement Program is a collaborative capital investment program designed to restore and protect Lake Tahoe. The slide you see here really represents not an all-encompassing list of partners, but a cross-section of the partners and collaboration that occurs to accomplish the projects on the ground annually. This collaborative program is funded by federal, state, local, and private dollars. And the federal share is really the Lake Tahoe Restoration Act, which authorized $415 million in 2016 and serves as an anchor for the state, local, and private match. In September 2024, LTRA was extended for another 10 years. And so the request that you see is the working group's efforts to put together our priority request to DC this past year. Next slide, please. So for fiscal year 2026, the working groups came together and put together a package requesting approximately $42 million across the various focus areas to accomplish the environmental improvement program work. And the working groups, just to give you an idea of how that happens, they come together collaboratively and they use a variety of criteria to develop what the priority project list will look like. Things like, are projects shovel ready for implementation or planning? Can funding be utilized immediately? Is there a federal nexus with these projects? And then are they all collaboratively supported across the partnership? And then we also look at the historical appropriations when ranking and trying to determine what the ask by working group and overall ask across all working groups will be. So historically, about $100 million, I believe between 99 and $100 million was the fiscal year request across all working groups. This year, we went with a tighter request of $42 million, and that was strategic, just understanding the political climate that we're stepping into. Next slide, please. So for forest health and fire protection, I'm just going to give you an idea of kind of what are the priorities that were submitted within each of these categories. Still focusing on large landscape restoration, projects like Lake Tahoe West and the Caldor Fire Restoration EA are included in that area. Water for fire suppression, as you heard from Julie, this is on the top of everyone's mind after the LA fires. And we actually in the basin have made great progress in terms of upgrading our water infrastructure for fire, but there's obviously still more to be done. And so there's a smattering of those projects on there. Community wildfire protection plan implementation. This is focusing on the local and state WUI areas or wild and urban interface, areas in the basin. And then lastly, Washoe tribal capacity building. So last year we were able to host a TREX training with the Washoe tribe. And this year we're really focusing on how we build their capacity to do cultural and beneficial burning in the basin. Next slide, please.
Dr. McIntyre, can I
Yes.
just go back one slide and just interject? The pipe, for those of
Oh,
you
yeah.
who haven't looked at that visual, we see it all the time. I wanted to explain how powerful that is. Our water purveyor partners like Shelly Thompson from STPD, they carry this thing around. It's heavy. And so the little pipe in the middle is what we've got. And the big one around the outside is what we need. Okay. I mean, just very simply. And when you see it visually, the small 2-inch line is not sufficient because that is what, in the 1940s, 50s, 60s, 70s was all around the basin. And it's very expensive to upgrade that. So I just wanted to elaborate.
Great,
But
thank
thank you
you.
for including the picture.
Yeah, thank you so much. Next slide, please. So in terms of aquatic invasive species, 3 key priorities. One includes basin-wide prevention. So in 2023, we had the introduction of the New Zealand mud snail, and we are now dealing with the potential threat of the golden mussel that you will hear about later today. And so now more than ever, prevention is critical to make sure that we are maintaining and protecting Lake Tahoe. The middle photo is highlighting the Tahoe Keys. So the control methods test wrapped up. We just finished year 3. And so using the data from the control methods test and looking to the future, what is the long-term strategy for the Tahoe Keys in terms of containment and control and ideally eradication. And then lastly, surveillance and monitoring. This goes hand in hand with the prevention piece. Our ultimate goal for the Aquatic Invasive Species Program is surveillance of all sites within the Tahoe Basin. We would get them under control, we would have eradication, and then we would just be surveilling sites into the future. Next slide, please. For watersheds and water quality, we recently achieved the stream environment zone threshold. So yay, success there. There is more to come. And in terms of that more to come, it is a continued focus on large landscape watershed restoration. So the top picture is Motel 6, what they are calling the Upper Truckee Marsh South project. That was a big investment of mitigation funds from TRPA last year. And then the bottom project is the Johnson Meadow Marsh Restoration Project, which is really right across the street from the Upper Truckee River Marsh Restoration. And then lastly, area-wide stormwater treatments. We know these are critical, especially with the affordable housing program and program that's kind of moving forward. And so that is also a top priority when it comes to watersheds and water quality. Next slide, please. For Lahontan cutthroat trout, the next 2 focus areas, Lahontan cutthroat trout and science, stewardship, and accountability. We put in annual requests. I do want to note that these are not, they have not historically been funded. We have not received allocations in these 2 areas. For Lahontan cutthroat trout, it is really to maintain the focus on reintroduction through habitat assessments in the region, aquatic fish barrier removal on streams and creeks, and then Upper Truckee River habitat restoration. Additionally, there are annual releases of Lahontan cutthroat trout into tributaries and the lake. And so this funding would go to support that as well. Next slide, please. And last, but certainly not least, science, stewardship, and accountability. As I mentioned, this has not historically been allocated funding, but support for continued support for the tribal liaison position that has been funded again through partnership dollars to really build the capacity at the tribe to engage in a meaningful way with the environmental improvement program and projects on the ground. Lake Tahoe info and EIP tracker support so that we can continue to highlight the projects and be transparent about all the great work that's occurring and the funding being spent. And then lastly, supporting EIP effectiveness monitoring and innovative technology, which you'll hear a little bit about in Shannon's presentation. So with that, I will hand it to Shannon to talk about the EIP 2025 projects.
Hi, good morning, Madam Chair, EIP Committee, Shannon Friedman. That 2025 is going to be a huge year for the Environmental Improvement Program. There are a ton of projects that will be implemented, over 40 projects to be specific, which is over a $250 million investment across the Lake Tahoe region on environmental improvement projects. A lot of the projects received Lake Tahoe Restoration Act funding in previous rounds, but also got funding from a variety of sources from federal, state, local, and the private sector. All of these projects advance threshold attainment in our 4 focus areas. And the real shout out of kind of the season goes to the city of South Lake Tahoe. They're having their largest EIP investment to date with an investment of over $120 million this year in over 20 projects across the board. And that's a result of years of planning and design and working with the partnership to get funding on all of those projects. So huge shout out to the city and all of the partners for this incredible work that's going to be happening this year. Next slide, please. Forest health projects continue to be a priority in the EIP, and you can see from this subset of projects, the region really is taking a holistic approach to forest health and making sure that we have healthy forests and that our community is resilient to fires, but then also prepared if a wildfire does occur. This includes having more resilient corridors. NV Energy in Nevada and Liberty Utilities in California continue to update their corridors so they're more resilient through tree removal and hardening. The EIP continues to invest in technology such as the BurnBot that makes fuel reduction more efficient and cleaner. We continue to do prescribed fire. And then as both Kat and Julie mentioned, there's a big investment in water infrastructure for fire suppression and updating that infrastructure. DL Bliss State Park just will be finishing this year upgrade to their system, which is 8,000 linear feet of upgraded infrastructure that will help them fight fire, as well as provide safe water for their visitors to that park. Next slide, please. A lot is happening in watersheds and water quality to improve the stormwater runoff and improve the clarity of Lake Tahoe, as well as stream environment zones. This picture on the right is in existing conditions of the Upper Bijou Park Creek watershed. This area is prone to flooding during certain times of the year, which is a safety issue, but also a big water quality concern as well. This project will remove hard coverage, reduce flooding, and improve water quality coming off of both the roadways and the built environment. And that will be constructed this year. All of these projects combined will retrofit 26.6 miles of roadway throughout the region to reduce the pollutants coming from the built environment and improve clarity going into Lake Tahoe. That will also equal 4.5 acres of stream environment zone that will be restored across the entire region. Next slide, please. Aquatic invasive species is also a continued priority for the Lake Tahoe region. The Taylor-Tillac Aquatic Invasive Species Plant Removal Project was the largest treatment project in the basin to date. We treated 17 acres of aquatic invasive plants in the Taylor-Tillac watershed in South Lake Tahoe. That project is actually wrapping up and we're almost done removing all of those barriers, and we'll move into monitoring, and it's proven to be a huge success. We're also continuing to do surveillance so we can rapidly respond to new infestations, investing in technology such as the CD3 machine that allows non-motorized users to adequately clean, drain, and dry their non-motorized watercraft. As we're aware, golden mussels were found in California watersheds. So the EIP partnership and aquatic invasive species team is really digging into that and bringing awareness around that issue and how to best prevent that from entering into the waters of the Lake Tahoe region. And then continued ongoing outreach and engagement with the Tahoe Keys, which is, as we all know, has a large population of invasive species. Next slide, please. There's also a lot of work going on in sustainable recreation and transportation. I wanted to highlight the Kale Complete Streets project, which I understand you talked about operations. This multi-benefit project has been a high priority for the EIP project for years. It is a Douglas County owned street right here in State Line in Douglas County, Nevada. And it will improve the intersection at Kale Drive and US 50, underground utilities, install sidewalks, bike lanes, and improve drainage infrastructure and the roadway itself. And this project is a result of years of planning. And when you have these multi-benefit projects, you really need to get a multi-source of funding because not one funding source can pay for all of it. So this really got funding from federal, state, local, private, across the board. And so it's a huge achievement that it's all able to finally come together, and we'll see that project be implemented this year. All of these projects together will have 1.2 miles of new trail built as well. Next slide, please. It is really important that all EIP projects are based on best science. So the EIP continues to invest in science. And then when we talk about the EIP partnership, it really means everybody. And so the stewardship and accountability is making sure that everybody is stewards of the environment and accountable for their actions and improving the environment and great resources of Lake Tahoe. So I wanted to highlight a few things here. One is the Lake Tahoe Litter Summit that has occurred the last few years, and that will occur again this year. And that is really critical because, as we've seen on the ground and through news sources, a few years ago, over 4th of July and other busy years, like our beaches and recreation spots were at capacity. The trash situation was not super desirable. So through destination stewardship, we've held this litter summit, and it really was shown last year to be super effective at bringing the partnership together and having a plan that was actually worked at improving the situation there. And then investing in technology that improves the EIP. And we also have the Lake Tahoe Ambassador Program, which is a great program that puts people on the ground and out to highly visited recreation sites to educate people on the EIP. A large focus of that has been on the Aquatic Invasive Species Program and letting people know who are carrying their kayak and other non-motorized watercraft about clean, drain, and dry and how to use the CD3 machine. And that program has been really successful in educating people on how they can be stewards of the environment while they are recreating here and visiting Lake Tahoe. Next slide, please. There are 2 projects that will be coming to the governing board for approval this year. One is the Van Sickle Bi-State Park project, phases 2 and 3. The Van Sickle Bi-State Park is a park that is both in California, owned by the California Tahoe Conservancy, and in Nevada, owned by Nevada Division of State Parks. The park was first built in 2012 and was really parking lots and a trailhead, but the vision plan showed further build out of that park. So phases 2 and 3 will include a visitor center, some employee housing to house some state park staff, some maintenance facilities, as well as best management practices and some more trail connections. And then the Spooner Mobility Hub and Permanent Aquatic Invasive Species Station is one project that's part of that larger State Route 28 corridor. And we will bring that forward to the governing board for approval this year as well. Next slide, please. This is just an update on projects that have been approved by the governing board in the last 5 years and kind of where they are. And what you will see is that a lot of these projects have either been complete or actively being constructed or in design. So once they get complete, we really do continue to work on making sure that they get implemented and we get that threshold attainment that we are looking for through these projects. Next slide, please. And that concludes our presentation, and we will take any questions or any discussion around the Lake Tahoe Restoration Act or EIP projects.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kat and Shannon. Do you have any comments or questions from the board? Ms. Conrad Zeta.
Ashley Conrad Seda for the record. So a couple of questions about the 26 funding proposal. With the Lahontan work and some of the stewardship and accountability work being expected to just not be funded, those seem to be things that could actually be integrated in other areas. For example, you could include monitoring in every other funding area as a way to monitor and report to the dashboard. So I'm interested in how you've been thinking about that. And then with the Lahontan cutthroat trout, that also feels a lot like a watershed restoration project. And I'm wondering if there's a way to wrap all of those together, because if you lose both of those, then you're down to about a third of the funding for 2026 of what you saw last year. And it seems like you're being even too conservative. So I'm wondering if there's a way to wrap that in and increase the ask, or just keep the ask as is, but maybe combine the programs in a different way. And I really appreciate how you already changed the language in your ask to be, more palatable to the world right now. So, I appreciate that you've done that already, but that might be another way to do that work as well. And then on AIS, I just had a question about the mobile units and the decontamination work itself. I assume when folks come in, you get a sense of figuring out where they've been, and that tells you, how much decontamination will be necessary. But are you able to collect and report that data to say, boat X came in from Lake Y and it did or did not have these species, and share that to a general database, even in the remote units?
Okay, I'll start with the Lahontan cutthroat trout and accountability piece, and then I'll hand it to Dennis to talk about the CD3 machine. Thank you, Dennis, for being here. So that is a great idea, and it is something that the working groups have started to consider, especially when we talk about the science and monitoring piece. We recognize that the Science Council often is not getting funded through LTRA. And so that is something we're considering, but definitely with the LCT, I think that's something that we can bring back to the watersheds group and suggest that they start thinking about. But I'd also maybe, Kim, I don't know if you have additional thoughts or if that.
Sure, thank you. Kim Carringer for the record. It's a great suggestion, and we have done a little bit of it in the past as far as the monitoring and science aspects. We've been able to build it into some projects, like you said, in like our watersheds and water quality. There was a USGS project that was able to get tributary monitoring. When it makes sense, we can package it in and look at it really holistically. So it is something that we try to consider. But we might need to be doing more of it, considering that hasn't been funded yet. And with the Fish and Wildlife funding through LCT, they have other funding streams that can support that program outside of LTRA. The LTRA would accelerate probably their work, but it's something that it hasn't gone funded, but they've been able to support it through other funding sources at this time.
Thanks. Yeah, on the monitoring, I would say that, in my 20 years of it working in the public sector, monitoring is almost never funded if you call it out separately. Whereas if as a way of proving the efficacy of the funding and being able to report back to the funding source, and it's a reporting aspect, it's much more likely to get funded. So the more you can include it as an accountability aspect of every dollar, then it's pennies on the dollar and it's part of the entire project. And I've seen that get through a lot more readily than a standalone monitoring program.
Good morning, Dennis Sabaglo, Aquatic Invasive Species Program Manager for the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency. Actually could weigh in a little bit on the LCT piece as well. Now that our control projects are really expanding to these large scale restoration type projects, such as the Taylor Talac, which is a really key tributary for LCT. So we are helping promote habitat. And as far as a monitoring piece for LCT, we have started incorporating these aquatic invasive species management plans for marinas that are required to be conducted. And other species of note are also included in those monitoring pieces. So if there are observations of other species of interest, then those are included in those, and that is brought back out to through the EIP tracker. And then with the decontamination monitoring and statistics, we partner with all of our implementation partners throughout the West, what we call the Watercraft Inspection and Decontamination app, where all of that information is stored, and then others that were boats coming from Tahoe, perhaps Colorado, they can see all that information, what was done to that boat exactly from a decontamination perspective and where it's been. And with the CD3 machine that has an embedded monitoring tool to track all of the tools that are being used for how long, and that all also gets back reported back up through the EIP tracker.
Any additional comments or questions? Yes, please.
Thanks for the presentation. I'll second what Ashley said. That's brilliant. Accountability and reporting versus monitoring. 2 thumbs up. That's a brilliant approach to package it that way. What is a burn bot? I could guess. I have my hunch, but I don't think you addressed it.
I got it. So BurnBot is a company and they have 2 different types of technology. One is a remote masticator that can go out in the field. We actually are finding that the remote masticator can treat fuels at almost can do 3 times the pace of a hand crew. So we're trying to figure out, right, how we then target what's the best use of a hand crew out on the ground versus maybe the BurnBot masticator. And then the really cool tool that we're going to pilot is the actual BurnBot, which is like an air curtain burner that you can then send out on the ground. It produces 0 smoke emissions. It burns and moves on and burns and moves on. So it's almost like a completely contained prescribed burn. And where we're thinking it might be useful is setting control line for a broadcast burn. You could essentially build the box and then burn inside, but they're doing really great work down in more kind of like in the foothills and in grass areas. And so we'd actually be piloting how this works in timber with pine needles.
Good. Any further questions? Well, fantastic presentations. And of course, a lot of this information, hopefully we'll be able to utilize in the future when we're trying to establish project priorities. And I'm really excited about the new upcoming projects that we'll be looking at here shortly. Okay, so we can move on with the agenda as this was an informational item for no action. And now we're going to be moving to agenda item number 5, which is the 2023 threshold evaluation update. And information on this item can be found on page 423. As a reminder to the public, since this item is informational only, we'll hear any public comment on this topic at the final public comment interest period. So now I think we have Ken Katzman, who's, thank you for joining us, is going to present the report on this item.
Yes, good morning. Again, Ken Katzman, Department Manager for Research Analysis here at TRPA. And we just wanted to bring an update to the committee to talk about what we've heard so far through the release of the draft threshold evaluation and some of the next steps. So we want to move to the next slide, please. Again, we released the draft evaluation at the governing board meeting in February. And so you see here in the timeline, we're at the EIP committee here in March. We did also present the draft evaluation to the Advisory Planning Commission this month. And really what we're working through this schedule is a discussion that we'll have next month at the retreat to talk about some of the major themes that we're seeing in the evaluation, and to strategize on recommendations that will come in our final threshold evaluation release that will happen in June. So we're marching towards that release. Next slide. So just a reminder, at all of these public meetings, these are the questions that we've asked of everyone. What are the things that you're particularly proud of and the accomplishments that we've seen over the last 4 years and beyond? And what are the areas of concern that have been identified in the evaluation and that we have that we want to look to prioritize actions? And so, what are the things that we both through the EIP and the prioritization of projects, as well as what changes may we as TRPA be looking at in our work program, and as we move into the retreat and future planning. Next slide, please. So what have we heard? And for this exercise, we've grouped the major themes that we heard from the public, from the APC, from the board, and from our EIP partners and conversations that we've had with them as well. And so, again, when we've talked about what are the things that folks are particularly proud of and the accomplishments, we heard a lot about SEZ restoration. We heard a lot about the EIP partnership and collaboration as a whole, and AIS prevention and continuing those. When we've heard about the areas of concern and what we need to prioritize going forward, these are those themes. And so forest health and wildfire, how we're looking at home hardening and design standards, minimizing risk, and looking at things like evacuation risk, looking at some of our policies around safety and congestion, parking management on the transportation side. Next slide. On the water quality side, again, we've talked a lot about in our previous presentations about this disparity between summer and winter clarity. So continuing to investigate that, looking at microplastics and those impacts to drinking water and overall lake health and water quality. A lot of discussion in water quality and also in our noise thresholds about those standards that were not evaluated in this evaluation and some of the reasons behind that. And again, hearing from our partners in particular about, we want to continue our pollutant load reductions through the TMDL program and continue our great momentum on invasive species and other programs. Next slide. Again, we just saw in the previous discussions about transparency and communications and what we're doing with our monitoring programs. And again, we're hearing those themes through the threshold evaluation feedback as well. A lot of questions, and I'll speak to this in a moment about the peer review, but also how we're continuing with our commitment to science, our public engagement, and particularly as we move into, it's again, connecting back to Julie's comments earlier, funding for our monitoring and implementation programs, both TRPA programs as well as those of our partners, in collecting field data and having the information itself to determine our threshold status. In sustainable recreation, again, a lot of comments around updating our recreation thresholds and looking at visitor management. Next slide. I want to again speak to some of the things that we talked in our previous presentations about the peer review and how the Science Council engaged experts in the field to look at our evaluation and give us feedback. And I don't think we were maybe as clear about how we utilize that feedback. So the peer review was conducted prior to the release of our evaluation in February. And so there were actually numerous specific changes that we made to the evaluation before we released it in February. And that includes numerous changes to the actual analysis itself. So and an example is in our air quality with the discussion of wildfire and the impacts of wildfire to our air quality threshold evaluation and the trends. The peer reviewer specifically called out that we needed to do more around the impact of wildfire and looking at those impacts and separating out periods without the wildfire impacts. And that is an analysis that we added to the evaluation before it was published. Numerous examples of this in water quality as well, and in soils where there was actually, the peer reviewers highlighted that we actually did not have the correct attainment calls, and we changed those as a result of that comment. So those changes were implemented before the draft release was put out. There are also recommendations from the peer reviewers that are going to be considered as part of the recommendations report because they really lead to what do we do next? Where do we need to prioritize the monitoring resources? What thresholds do we need to prioritize for threshold update? And so we're considering those comments really as part of the next step, as part of the recommendations report, and again the priorities that we'll bring to you next month at the retreat. Again, numerous comments also from the peer review about just adding documentation, adding background, and substantiating the information that we've presented, and all of that was added to the evaluation before it went out. Next slide, please. So I also wanted to talk about these comments that we've received and you've heard from folks about both the number of indicators that we did not report a status on and those where we were unable to determine a trend for. And I think, one thing that I want to highlight is that as we've looked at evaluations through time, and here you can see from 2011 to the 23 evaluation on the left, and from 15 to 23 on the right, that we have continually worked to address this issue and to be able to report on more thresholds with each successive evaluation, and to reduce the number where we're not able to determine trends. So in this particular evaluation, there were 6 fewer standards that we were not able to report on. So we went from 34 in 2019 to 28 in 2023. And really that's both the additional monitoring and science that has come into the evaluation where we're able to make more calls. And it also reflects the changes that we as a board and that you have made to update our thresholds. So where we had standards that were not measurable or where we could not determine status, we have taken action to update those thresholds. An example being the AIS standards, where we had numerous standards about AIS that were not measurable. They were not something that we were able to determine status on. And instead, last year, we adopted new standards for the removal of aquatic weeds that are specific, that are measurable, and we're able to report on them in this evaluation. So that process takes time, but progressively with each evaluation, we are addressing those. And again, that is as we move into our recommendations, one of the recommendations that the APC made was that, we should set a goal of being able to report on every threshold that's in the system by the next evaluation. I think it's an admirable goal, and hopefully we can get there. But it means accelerating our threshold update process. Next slide, please. We also wanted to address comments that we've heard about just more clarity or more transparency in the reporting itself. And in particular, there were comments made about the threshold dashboard where when we initially released it, there are a number of standards where they're marked as NA, and people weren't sure what that means. And so we want to be clear about that. These standards are those where the standard itself has been retired and is no longer evaluated in this evaluation because it is not a current standard, or in the case on the very bottom here, where it was a new standard that had been adopted and was not present in a prior evaluation. And we recognize that the NA maybe wasn't very specific. And so if we hit the next button, we actually have a proposal that we've been working on with our technology partners to make it a little bit more clear. And so for those standards that are retired, to actually label them as retired in the dashboard. And we wanted to bring this as a proposal to you. And if we, if this sounds right, we're ready to execute this and make these changes in the dashboard just to make it a little bit more clear to the readers. And again, we want to be clear that throughout this process, maybe we'll go to the next slide. As we've received feedback, we have looked to improve the user experience on the dashboard. To be clear, we are not making any changes to the draft evaluation itself. Any of the findings or any of the text on the specific indicator pages is locked down and is not editable at this point. But where we can add guidance to the user, like changing those NAs to retireds, or in this case, adding language that describes for those standards that were retired, when it was retired and why, and provides a link to the staff report that supports the decision that was made by the board to remove those standards. And in this particular case, where there is a new standard, being able to provide a link and a breadcrumb to the user so that they can see where that information now resides. So these are changes that we have made since the release of the draft evaluation, so that it's a little bit more user-friendly to the public. Next slide, please. So what are our next steps? As I've mentioned, at the strategic planning retreat next month, we will be bringing more detail about all the specific pieces that we've heard and the themes, and being able to put them into a structure of where do we think this sits? Is this a TRPA piece? Is this something that we may delegate to the Science Council or to our partners? Is this an EIP thing? And so being able to really identify both what is TRPA's role, what are our partners' roles, and where are we going to get those commitments to make sure that this is a priority as we go into the next phase of setting our recommendations, and then looking at whatever changes are necessary to TRPA's work program and resources, as well as those of our EIP partners. And as I said, we'll be bringing a draft copy of that recommendations in May, and then we'll bring the final threshold evaluation in June, along with that updated work program and plan. So with that, I will take any questions.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Caseman. Any questions from members? Ms. Lane?
Thank you for that presentation. I would just say, I think that's much clearer than the NA. So I really like the ideas you came up with.
Conrad Zeta.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I think it's clear. I definitely had to look back at the legend a few times to just continue to familiarize myself with it as I saw it. So I think just maybe populating the legend throughout so people can just reference it would be helpful to make sure they remind themselves of what each of those arrows mean. And then just a note on the peer review and responsiveness to comments. I think it's just important to remember that we track these thresholds to help us understand, what is the quality of the lake? Are the steps that we're taking actually improving the quality? And what changes might we make in policy or direction or funding? So I would just really emphasize that ensuring that those peer review comments are the ones that we review and incorporate, that they're actionable, right? There's a way to take action on those comments. There's a way to move forward and make regulatory or policy decisions versus they are interesting comments. And yes, we could do more study, but like this is about taking action, right? And about being a body that can move the needle in the amount of effort, expense, science, outreach that we do to affect lake quality.
Thank you. Any further comments, questions? Okay, well, this is fantastic. And I think we're all looking forward to the retreat when we can dig into this a lot deeper and how this is going to help us also in prioritizing, what projects, the entire team is going to be focusing on for the next couple of years. So really appreciate that. Okay, so now we will close up. I'm sorry, just skip down to the bottom of the agenda here. So now we'll move on to item number 6 on the agenda, which is committee member comments. Do we have any? Okay. Then we will move now to public interest comments. And this is our final matter of business. And we will take any member of the public wishing to address the Environmental Improvement Program Committee on any item listed or not listed on the agenda may do so at this time. Individuals or groups who have already commented on items listed on the agenda are not permitted to comment on the same topic. The Environmental Improvement Program Committee is prohibited by law from taking immediate action or discussing any issues raised by the public during this public comment period. Finally, comments must relate to matters within the jurisdiction of the agency. If any member of the public wishes to speak at this time, please raise your hand now, either in person now or if you're not in person, online, clicking the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom screen or by dialing *9 on your phone, and you will be called upon and unmuted by a TRPA staff member. Okay, do we have any members of the public here in the room that would wish to speak on this item? Okay. Seeing none, do we have anyone online?
We have 2 hands raised so far. Melissa Soderston, please address the committee.
Yes, thank you. Melissa Soderston, South Lake Tahoe, representing Tahoe Forest Matter and the Eco Integrity Alliance. I attended the Fire Adapted Nevada Summit hosted by Nevada Living Fire and UNR last week. Attended by many local fire agencies, reps from the Forest Service, Bureau of Land Management, and the Nevada Division of Forestry, as well as insurance agency data analysts and evacuee. The so-called thinning, fuels reduction, fuel break are not going to protect life and property from wind and climate-driven fire, and they are likely exacerbating our climate problems. These are no longer wildfires, they are urban conflagrations. The keynote speaker said it best. It is time for a paradigm shift. We must achieve community-wide home and infrastructure hardening to survive our rapidly changing climate. Yet every single grant available prioritizes acreage over parcels. We cannot succeed if we continue to place the burden of defensible space on the low-income, elderly, or disabled people, or absentee owners. This summit made it very clear. We must focus all local, state, and federal funding on implementing truly fire-wise communities. These fires are spreading structure to structure, and 90% of the most destructive are human-caused. New logging roads only mean more access for human-caused starts and more sediment into our watershed. We need the billions being spent out in the forest to instead be spent on evacuation routes and centers, Class A roofing, ember-safe fence, home-out defensible space. We need the workforce currently destroying our environment to instead be clearing debris from vacant buildings or burying utility lines. This agency has notoriously focused on landscape-scale projects. Yet at the Tahoe Science Conference, your own keynote speaker, head of the research and development at U.S. Forest Service, said clearly that these projects are likely causing long-term ecosystem harm. We urge you to immediately implement this necessary paradigm shift and to focus on the built environment improvements we cannot live without, rather than the business as usual logging lies. Take a walk outside. Our largest, most climate and fire resistant trees are what they are removing. It's hot, dry, dusty, filled with invasive grasses. Stop the greed, stop the destruction. Focus on climate hardened infrastructure. The insurance reps at the summit said it far for the deniers out there. You will not be able to insure your home for long here unless we all have Firewise properties. Let's make the right policy choices for not only the environment and our lives, but for our wallets as well. And one final note, instead of monitoring wildfire smoke, perhaps consider measuring data from logging emissions and pile burning, which are much greater threats and actually under our control. We need a basin-wide environmental impact report.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Next is Niobe Burden. Please go ahead and address the committee.
Good morning, Chair, members of the Governing Board. My name is Niobe Burden. I live in Tahoe Vista, and I have been delving into the peer report and have some serious, am the one that voiced serious concerns regarding that report, the lack of public transparency and acknowledging these findings in the 2023 draft TRPA Environmental Threshold Report and presentation on February 26th. The review identifies significant scientific and methodological issues across multiple environmental threshold categories, including data inconsistencies, outdated references, vague status determinations, and a lack of measurable benchmarks. These shortcomings raise fundamental questions about the accuracy and reliability of TRPA's threshold evaluation process. I'm not sure how these issues would be raised or corrected on the threshold with commentary. Yet, when this report was presented to you, TRPA failed to explicitly acknowledge or address these concerns. While there are maybe an internal effort to correspond to the recommendations, commentary alone is not enough. Meaningful action and additional resources are required. Without transparency on these issues are being addressed. The public and key stakeholders, including scientists, policymakers, and the broader Tahoe community, are left in the dark. As TSAC stated in its summary, the disconnect between some standards and management activities reinforces the need to revisit the threshold standard system for air quality, noise, recreation, vegetation, preservation, and water quality. Revisiting the threshold standards and the associated data sources is needed to ensure TRPA's monitoring programs can best inform implementation actions and monitor the impacts of those investments. I'm urging this board to take the following actions: publicly acknowledge the TSAC findings in the final version, and explicitly outline where recommendations have been incorporated. Ensure the changes made in response to the review are clearly documented and accessible to the public, including updates to threshold methodologies, data reporting, and trend evaluations. Fund additional resources and scientific staff to strengthen TRPA's ability to implement credible science-driven improvements. I've heard that there is not a scientist on the staff. Commit to an independent follow-up review to verify that TRPA's response effectively resolves the critical issues identified. Lake Tahoe's environmental health depends on accurate science, transparent governance, and public accountability.
If you could wrap up your comments, please.
Thank you. And I just urge everyone to take this more seriously and really see where the issues need to be addressed and fund those. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Okay, are there any further hands that have been
Yes, we do
raised?
have,
Okay, thank you.
4 more hands raised. Next is Tim D. Please state your full name for the record.
Hello, my name is Tim Delaney. Can you all hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Excellent. Okay, so yes, I grew up in Incline Village. I've been in the Tahoe Basin since 1970. Okay. And I see this new administration here in our federal government. And it's a little shocking. It looks like nothing but an ego bro show. That's what I see. I think, shucks, if that's all that's needed to become president of the United States and end up in the White House, well, shucks, I could have wiped everybody out. Sure. What should I talk about? Should I talk about my Angor Lake cliff dives? Think about that. I went in with my head over 120 times. They wanted laws to ban me from doing that. Or should I talk about my surfing? 14 to 20-foot wave out in Santa Cruz, right? Oh, gee, underwater hockey. Really? Is anyone there to save me in the middle of that ocean? 3 minutes underwater after being smacked by your board unconscious and you're dead. No one can take care of you. And then there's my skiing, of course. Okay, we all know about that. And of course, there are my fighting skills. Now, look, in regards to environment, obviously, I do not like folks that wreck environment. I see that as against God, okay? When it comes to managing your forests up in the Tahoe Basin, what you need to do is you cultivate old growth forest, old growth. What you do is you mark a big tree, and every, say, 40 to 60 feet, there's another big tree. Those trees for all eternity will never be cut down. Okay? That's what you do. So the thing here is I'm a little bummed out here, just looking at this big picture here, and all this stuff being done that is against environment and life. It doesn't make any bit of sense. One day in Santa Cruz, this individual asked me what my connection with God was. And the kids, of course, my kids are pretty rough when it comes to surfing and skiing and everything else as well. And they're wondering what dad's going to say. All things debauchery dad. What's he going to say to these people? I told them that, well, I'll give you an example. When I'm in a 14 to 20-foot wave, right in the midsection sailing by there, right? And right as that wave is about to wall up and crush me, and I punch through the backside, and I survive. That's my connection with God. I thank God every single time I lived through the concept.
Thank you for your comments. We need to move on to the next speaker.
Next is iPhone 12. Please state your name for the record and go ahead and address the committee.
Hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. Yes, I'm a visitor to the Douglas County community. TRPA approval of the South Shore Area Plan, which includes increases in height, density, and coverage, will make it harder for me to
Sir,
escape.
if I could just interrupt you very quickly. That item is on the General Governing Board's agenda, and you can speak to that item when that comes up.
I am actually,
This testimony is for the Environmental Improvement Project Committee meeting.
oh, this is not for this that I'm talking about?
No, this is the Environmental Improvement Program Committee meeting. The General Governing Board meeting will take place shortly. And that item is specifically on the agenda, and you can speak when that item comes up.
I was not going to be able to speak at that time. That's why I was trying to address my my grievances right now, if I could, please.
Well, again,
And have my
just so that
comments.
you
Can
know,
I-
you do, yeah, the clock is still set for, your
Perfect.
2 minutes
Thank
and
you
30
very-
seconds.
Okay,
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Density and coverage will make it harder for me to escape a deadly wildfire. This will jeopardize my safety and infringe on my right to pursue safety under the Nevada State Constitution, which states Article 1, Section 1, inalienable rights. All men are by nature free and equal and have certain inalienable rights, among which are those of enjoying and defending life and liberty, acquiring, possessing, and protecting property, and pursuing and obtaining safety and happiness. Additionally, the adoption of the proposed South Shore Plan amendments will run counter to TRPA Regional Plan Goal LU 3.2, which states no person or persons shall develop property so as to endanger the public health, safety, and welfare. TRPA must conduct a comprehensive cumulative environmental and safety EIS before approving this project. I believe the TRPA has gone through not only on environmental issues and bypassed CEQA and NEPA. I don't know and understand how at the staff level, you guys can stamp an okay on letting the development that has gone on within the basin without any oversight. I know by law, you guys are violating the bi-state compact, and I hope that you guys are held accountable for your travesties to Lake Tahoe and the basin. The microplastics issue and the environmental issues from overdevelopment are obviously in the public's eye. And anything, I think the greatest thing that happened recently was Evan Dreyer and Get the Lead Out. You guys were able to go forward and help get the lead cable out that was abandoned 50 years ago from AT&T. And now I know that the environment has a microplastics problems and plastics coming off of cell towers that are going to be entering our watershed. I would hope that the TRPA starts opening their eyes and paying more attention to the lake instead of to the developers and the powers that be. Thank you very much for your time today and have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Can we have the next speaker, please?
Next, we have Doug Flaherty. Please go ahead and address the committee, Doug.
Thank you, Doug Flaherty, TahoeCleanAir.org. I just want to adopt and echo the comments made by Ms. Sodersman, I guess. She was first to speak online, and also Niobe Burdan. I adopt those comments as my own. And secondly, and finally, the environmental thresholds that have been developed over the years are unwieldy. They have been advanced time and time again, the threshold deadlines, the threshold specifics, and they've been advanced probably not out of some sort of a scheme, but basically out of the fact that the TRPA is under regulatory capture. You're so caught up in what the process that you've used for years that works for you, that allows you to stay in power, that allows you to moot real public comment, that allows you not to provide answers to public commenters, as in NEPA. It's horrendous, and the lake has suffered. The lake is not only in decline. Anybody that has been to the shoreline and seen the microplastics, the visible plastics the visible plastics, the plastic bags, the plastic degraded gunk, and the murkiness of the water. I will not swim in the lake. 6 years ago, it was swimmable. I will not drink out of the lake. You guys are lacking the leadership here to make a difference. The TRPA board and its committees must demand resignation of the leadership of the TRPA, and find somebody that has a vision for making changes. I believe it's really too late at this point. I can't even believe what it's going to look like in 2, 3, and 4 years. To come up with items like destination stewardship, all of your plans, consulting plans, they're doing nothing. And you're allowing degradation of the lake so you can keep this regulatory process going. I certainly don't know the answer, except there's no leadership either Appears to be no leadership either at the board level or at the leadership of the staff at the TRPA. It's just awful. It's tragic. By the time these thresholds are implemented, Lake Tahoe will be dead. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Do we have any additional hands raised?
One last hand raised online, and then we have one in the room.
Just
Good.
go online.
And it looks like her hand that was raised dropped her hand, so.
For the speaker in the room, if you want to come to the podium and state your name for the record.
Oh, sorry. My name is Angie Regan. I'm a physical therapist and the founder of Access Tahoe, an organization dedicated to ensuring that everyone, regardless of ability, can enjoy Tahoe's outdoor spaces. I appreciate the TRPA's work to protect this region, but protection should not come at the cost of exclusion. Right now, TRPA coding follows only the bare minimum of ADA law, mostly ramps, bathrooms, and parking, leaving children in wheelchairs unable to reach the water on their field trips, grandparents stuck at the sidewalk watching from a distance to see their grandchildren play, and adults with movement disorders at risk of falling on uneven ground. Equitable access benefits everyone. A well-designed, accessible pathway helps not just those with disabilities, but also families with strollers, beach carts, and anyone who wants a safer way to enjoy the Tahoe. Accessibility is not just a legal requirement, it is the right thing to do. I urge the TRPA to go beyond the bare minimum by 1, updating land coverage codes to ensure accessibility is prioritized in all future projects with the ADA exemption. 2, providing mandatory staff training and hiring an accessibility specialist to guide planning. 3, educating all public beaches, trails, parks, and recreation sites on the process of making outdoor spaces accessible, starting with the TRPA permits. And 4, committing to including accessibility in all future transportation and recreation plans. Last year, the TRPA's active transportation plan included roller skaters, but ignored those with mobility devices and wheelchair users. This was an unacceptable oversight. Tahoe has very few accessible outdoor spaces, and that must change. Access to nature is a right, not a privilege, and TRPA has the power to do better. Let's build a Tahoe that welcomes everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, there's no other public comment.
Great. Okay, I think we do have one comment that staff would like to make. Kim?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kim Carringer for the record. I just want to do a brief summary at the end after public comment. I just want to say that we're continuing to accept public comments around the threshold evaluation through this process and into our priority setting strategic planning retreat next month. And some of the comments we heard today are some of the themes that we're hearing as far as the importance around wildfire response and home hardening, protecting old growth, and the peer review and transparency on how we are reporting on information and updating our thresholds. So we're going to know all those comments and keep those to inform the recommendations report. So I appreciate the comments, and we'll continue to show those themes that we've heard in the next meeting at next month's meeting. So thank you very much for the comments.
Okay, thank you. So we are closing the public comment period, and now we're moving on to item number 8, which is adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Okay, thank you. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, hearing none, meeting's adjourned. And